Good evening and welcome to Cooperative Vermont. We're coming to you live from VCAM Studios this Sunday, November 16th, 2014. I'm Matthew Cropp.
And I'm Eric Davis.
And we've got a couple of items on the agenda this evening. We'll be starting with a good list of cooperative news items. And then we'll be watching a video shot at the Full Barrel Co-op's Brew Day in September, featuring the head of the Vermont Brewers Association. And then we'll be concluding with a conversation with Maggie Cleary of the Morrisvill Co-op project, which has been the project to create a food co-op in Morrisvill, which has been really kind of chugging along, and they hit a big milestone recently.
Mm-hmm. It's a story we've been following for a while, and it'd be nice to sort of delve into it a little deeper.
Mm-hmm. So this will be a good opportunity for that, but first the news.
Yeah, so Matt, you were telling me about some potential news at the Farrington Mobile Home Park?
Yes. So off of the North Ave in Burlington is a mobile home park right across the street from where the Hannafords is, called Farrington. And the owner recently passed away. There's 100-something families that live in there. It's obviously affordable housing in a city where affordable housing is pretty hard to come by. So there's been some rumors circulating about what's going to happen to the park. So some people have been saying, okay, well the person who's now the current owner has no intention of selling it. There's other rumors that some of the other family members do want to sell it. So there's been kind of going back and forth on it. So this week there was a meeting called with a number of residents and representatives of different organizations that provide assistance to people in this situation. And for those who watch our show regularly, they know that we interviewed some folks from Milton where there was a similar situation, and the residents purchased the mobile home park cooperatively from the previous owner. So that is one of the options that's on the table for Farrington, and there's going to be some meetings coming up in December and then January to both kind of bring the community of residents together, because there's no existing residents association. So to get them together, and then potentially even to have a delegation from one of the other parks that has successfully made that kind of transition to come and talk to them a bit about what that process is like, what challenges they've faced. So it's kind of sort of an opportunity for some really good peer-to-peer learning, hopefully.
That's a really neat opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great.
And again, it's sort of nothing is set in stone. We're not sure exactly what's happening, but in a situation like this, especially when there's a lot of people's homes on the line, better to organize and than have it not turn out to be something to worry about than to be completely disorganized and only have the legally allotted time to pull everything together before other options are taken.
Right. And there's a lot of education that needs to happen too. So it's better to have a lot of time to organize those types of ventures. We also mentioned off the top that MoCo hit a big milestone. So this is the food co-op that's organizing in Morrisville, and they had a banner hanging at what's potentially going to be the home of the food co-op this past week, I believe. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. So there's really been some good progress made on that front, and it will be great to see the new food co-op joining the ranks of Vermont's food co-op community, which is already really one of the most extensive in the country. So that's pretty exciting. And another item that came up recently, a recent event, was there's a worker co-op conversation at Psychedelicatessen, which is on North Winooski Avenue. This was organized by the VEOC, which I am now working part-time for, which is exciting. But to bring together some people, either people who are in worker co-ops, people who are interested in worker co-ops, to meet Rink Dickinson, who's one of the co-founders of Equal Exchange, which is both a fair trade importer. So if you go to, say, City Market, you can find, they import chocolate, they import coffee, they import bananas, specifically and they specifically do business with small co-ops in developing countries. And so it was really, but they're also kind of known because they're one of the biggest worker co-ops in the U.S. They have over $50 million a year in revenue, over 100 employees or worker members. So they're one of those co-ops that's actually experienced, whereas a lot of worker co-ops are small, and you're talking they're small enough to kind of run as a collective. Where Equal Exchange is big enough that they've had to deal with having multiple layers of management, and so he was able to talk about that what it's like to be a bigger worker co-op, which was really interesting.
That's cool. And speaking of successful co-ops, City Market issued their patronage refunds this past week, redistributing almost $1 million, just shy of $1 million to I think about 11,000 members, which is pretty amazing. Both the money number and the number of members. That's great.
It seems City Market has definitely hit its stride in terms of consistently year after year, not paying out not just a token amount, but in this case, basically what they did was they took the rate of profit, and they decided 60% of that would be set aside for cash payments to members, prorated by how much they spent. So which came out to be about 4% of what you spent. So if you spent $1,000, you get at the co-op over the course of the year, you get $40 back, and then the other 40% was put aside in kind of in the name of each member as sort of like retained capital for the co-op, and so for members who've been, and they do that every year, sort of splitting it. So for members who've been members of the co-op for many years, that there's actually a substantial chunk of change held in their name by the co-op, which is a really cool way of kind of building this community wealth and being able to actually see that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and they have an opportunity for members to donate their patronage checks too, and they did something a little new this year with soliciting applications from organizations that had projects to strengthen the local food system, and having a member committee deliberate on those projects and recommend them to the board. So bringing in a little sort of community input into the patronage donation process. That's really neat.
And speaking of community input into donation processes, there's VSCCU is at it again. They've got we've talked a lot on the show about the idea of participatory community giving. Having community giving not just be something decisions made by a small committee or management, but spreading it out amongst the broader community of co-op members. And VSCCU has really, I think, more than any other credit union that I've seen in the state, kind of embraced that idea with this We Care Too program. So right now they're soliciting members to submit their favorite nonprofits to the credit union, and then also to leave comments about the nonprofits. And then the committee of members will then select 5, and after kind of reading the comments people have left about the organization, so select the 5 that seem to have the most interest on the part of the members, and the members will vote, and the top 2 will get $10,000, and the other 3 will get $1,000. Right. So it's a way of really engaging members around what, it's a not-for-profit, community-owned financial institution. So members aren't just voting on the board, but kind of having a say in where some of that those community giving dollars go.
Yeah, it's a really cool program. So if you're a VSCCU member out there, if you go to VSCCU's website, there's a list of community organizations, and you can learn more about the organizations as well as share organizations with friends or leave comments about that organization. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, and make your voice heard, because it's one more way that, even if you don't have much money in your own pocket to donate to worthy causes, this is a way of kind of participating in helping decide where some of that supporting funds go. So that's very cool. And then from the kind of more meta perspective of the thinking about the co-op movement as a whole, back in January, a whole bunch of people came together and at the offices of the Association of Vermont Credit Unions, people from all across the co-op movement in Vermont, to talk about formalizing this kind of Cooperative Vermont project into kind of a network. And since then, we've been doing this survey. We've been having regular sort of meetings every 2 weeks. And now we're getting to the point where the information's been gathered. It's time to reconvene and kind of really have the conversation of what are the next steps. Should this network be formalized? Should it be kept informal? If it is formalized, what sorts of role should it take on? What sorts of projects should it pursue? And so to kind of accomplish that, we actually have, first of all, we had someone come up, Tom Decker of the National Cooperative Business Association, and he was in Vermont to meet with a number of people and met with myself, Eric DeLuca, and Neely Jennings over dinner. And he's been in touch with a lot of groups doing similar kind of cross-sector co-op organizing in a lot of places. So we were able to have a really in-depth, good conversation about, kind of what the experience is and sort of what his thoughts are on it and kind of what our experience has been. And he's talking about pulling together a gathering of people who've been involved in those things to kind of share information, probably late spring, like May or something like that. So kind of looking forward to seeing what comes of that, but it seems like that there's really some real efforts now to start taking these individual local grassroots groups and trying to network them together. Mm-hmm. So that was exciting. And so the steering committee that was formed is going to meet on December 6th to kind of process some of the survey results and have a conversation about next steps. And the goal of the output of that meeting will be to call a big convergence, invite a lot of people from all different co-ops across the state for January or February, to kind of have a more in-depth discussion about the next steps for this project. So for anyone who's interested in bringing together co-op things, we'll be definitely putting out the word once we have that date and location as to where that meeting will be, and it'll hopefully be a real solid gathering of people who are interested in furthering the co-op movement in Vermont.
And another story that we've been following for a while on the show, and also one that hit another big milestone recently, is the Full Barrel Cooperative Brewery and Tap Room. Mm-hmm. And there was the Full Barrel held a brew day yesterday and made a pretty big decision for the organization. So
yeah, so I was there and pouring some beers and drinking some beers, and but yeah, so these organizing, I think this was maybe their 6th brew day. The organizing process has really been once a month, get together, brew some beer, drink some beer, do some work on the project, have a member meeting. And this time we've reached enough pledges. We've got about, I think, around 75 people pledged to join as members, and we have about 100 people on the volunteer list. And really, I think it's reaching the scale where there's time to think about incorporating, becoming legal entities, so that once it's incorporated, you can sign a lease, get insurance, start the long, arduous process of getting the paperwork necessary filed with all the right bureaucracies so that you can actually sell the beer that you brew. Mm-hmm. So really, the big question on the table was, should we move forward? Should we go to incorporate and start that process? So it was a unanimous thumbs up. Let's go. So in the coming weeks, the legal working group will be kind of convening to begin that process. And the goal will be to have the incorporation done by, I think, mid-January, and then to throw kind of a big bash party where first there's a kind of meeting where people pay in their $100. It was decided also at the meeting that the buy-in will be $100. So they'll pay in their $100, and then anyone who wants to run for the board of directors will have nominations, and then we'll block out a several-week voting period so that people who want to join but weren't able to make it to the actual meeting will be able to also participate and cast their votes for the founding board. Mm-hmm. And once we have the founding board, that board will be empowered to potentially hire people, to sign contracts, to enter into sort of different financial arrangements, set up the member loan program. So really, that board will be the sort of legally empowered entity that can then really take the project further forward. So it was definitely, we had a really sort of solid conversation, got into some really good meat on the question of our branding, and so there's going to be some more meetings coming in the future kind of on that. And I think there's also going to be some discussion about exactly kind of as we get bigger and how we structure our processes. So this is very ongoing, but for folks who are interested in this project, you can go to fullbarrel.coop to learn more, find out information, and sign up as a volunteer if you want to get involved. So it's right there, kind of on the cusp, but it's been a pretty wild journey from it being a few people with a Facebook page and March to this point where we're have a big crowd in a room, everyone raising their hands and voting to incorporate. So it was a very exciting day yesterday.
That's neat. And these brew days have, in addition to brewing beer and drinking beer, they've had a educational component to them, and I think we're going to be reaching back to sort of the first public brew day here for a video.
So our first public event was at the as opposed to friends and friends of friends, was at the Intervale Community Farm Co-op, and that one we actually had Kurt Stouter, the head of the Vermont Brewers Association, who also just recently published a book on kind of the history of Vermont beer. So we were fortunate to have one of our volunteers video his talk to our group. So I figure we'll watch that, and then when we get back, we'll have Maggie Cleary of the Morrisvill Co-op calling in to talk about the sort of exciting developments in Morrisvill with their project. So enjoy the video, and we'll see you in about 20 minutes.
All right. The book was sort of a labor of love. I was approached 5 years ago by the History Press. They have a number of titles in this series that they're doing of beer books around the country. And they harassed me for 5 years. I kept telling them I had no time to do this. They kept saying, we'll find you a co-author a year ago. And I said if they wanted it that bad, we would do it. So I got a co-author. His name is Adam Krakowski. He is an honest-to-God historian. And he decided to do the first half of this story, which was from colonial times until Vermonters embraced Prohibition, which was a whole lot earlier than a lot of people. I think Maine was the only place that did it earlier than Vermont. And the story is that we had a number of breweries, and it's sort of interesting. We've come full circle in a lot of ways. The first brewery to essentially raise funds to create a brewery was done in Wethersfield, Vermont, and it essentially was the state gave this guy permission to hold a lottery in order to raise the funds to create this brewery, and it sounds an awful lot like a Kickstarter campaign to me. We've come full circle at this point where people are essentially raising money through the generosity of strangers, and then they get a little piece of the action afterwards. So a couple of things happened here in Vermont. One of the things is because of our agriculture history, we were able to cultivate hops. And we were the second largest, by the turn of the century, by 1900, we were the second largest producer of hops. This is pretty good for a state that was essentially practicing prohibition at the time, and temperance. But it's funny, you look in some of the records of the various towns around Vermont, and school would start right after Labor Day, and the kids would all go to school, and then school would be called off. And essentially it was called off in order for the hops harvest to happen, which is a very labor intensive. If you guys have done your own hops, picking those little cones is a little labor intensive. So every community would get into it. Your kids, child labor laws were broken on a routine basis. And the result was boxcars full of hops would leave Vermont to be brewed in New York, Boston, Philadelphia. The only place that was making more hops was New York, and that just due to the sheer size of the state. It's funny, Adam, when he got interested in the hops cultivation in Vermont, one of the things he was doing was working in his master's degree in history here in Vermont and UVM. one of the things he was asked to do was to run around the state and look at old farming structures. And one of the things that he kept finding over and over again were these buildings that he had no explanation for. And one of the things that these buildings turned out to be used for was to dry hops. You know, they would take the vines and would dry the cones inside these buildings, which were these essentially narrow, tall buildings. And there are a few of these buildings that still exist today. Adam really is the guy to talk about the ancient history, but by the 1850s, the Vermont legislature was yearly deciding whether or not there was going to be prohibition. So one year they would do it, and then the next year it wouldn't happen, then it would get put in permanently. And from what Adam says in the book, this was the death of the Whigs here in Vermont. That was the last time the Whigs would ever run the show here in Vermont, was after they permanently instituted prohibition. So if you were a brewer in Vermont in the 1850s, you couldn't sell your beer locally anymore. So anybody that was still making beer, you know, we've got a long tradition of, you know, supporting our businesses in the state. They didn't make these businesses go out of business, but you couldn't sell your beer to Vermonters. And so the beer was, in a lot of these bottles that you look at, labeled for export only. So beer that was made either in Burlington or down in Bellows Falls or across the river in Walpole, New Hampshire, these beers were essentially sold out of state. There were a number of licensing agreements where beer produced in Vermont would bear the Pabst label, for example. So, I mean, there was a lot going on as far as beer production, but it essentially comes to a screaming halt in the 1870s, which is where Vermont essentially last brewery closes in the state. Now, there's a 100-year space. During that 100 years, no beer is made in the state. I mean, people are still drinking some beer, but Vermonters never really had a tradition of drinking or making beer in Vermont. If you look at Corin Hirsch just did a wonderful book about the cocktails here in colonial times. And one of the things that you'll find is a lot of apple cider was drank, a lot of rum was drank, but there really wasn't a tradition here in Vermont of beer making. And so we embraced Prohibition and the temperance movement in the 1850s. By the 1870s, we're done making beer. And then 100 years later, you have the likes of, you know, this is kind of interesting because, you know, you look at a lot of these places where you had the temperance movement through the 1920s. And, you know, during that period of time, the brewers were still making malt, you know, malted milks. The brewers were still, you know, the art still existed in places like Boston and Philadelphia, in New York. The brewers marked their time between, you know, the beginning and end of Prohibition, and essentially, you know, the continuation of the tradition of beer making, and the skills remained in those places. But Vermont, it was long gone. So by the 1970s, you have these home brewers that are set loose because of President Jimmy Carter changing the law and allowing for home brewing. And when that window was open just a crack, people realized that there really wasn't a whole lot of information about home brewing. The kits that could be purchased were all from England, which if you look at the craft brewing movement right now today, you'll see that a lot of these craft breweries are dominated by pale ales, Indian pale ales. I mean, you can't be a craft brewery now without an Indian pale ale. And stouts, English bitters. These are the kinds of kits that were coming to the United States from various kit makers in England. So that was the only way that you were going to get the ingredients to be able to make these beers. So in Vermont, you had Steve Mason of Catamount, who goes to England. He interns at a brewery, comes back with the skills he needs, and starts to raise the money. It takes him a while to raise the money. By 1987, he has raised the money, he's opened the brewery, and for the first time in over 100 years, beer is made in the state of Vermont in White River Junction. It's sort of interesting, you know, just up the road from Wethersfield, Vermont, where the first brewery in the state was made in, you know, in the colonial times, you know, that White River Junction, why Windsor County? You know, that's a big question. And to this day, you've got the old Catamount Brewery now is owned by Harpoon. You've got the Long Trail Brewery in Bridgewater Corners. And we're making so much beer in Windsor County. It's just a fluke, whether it's the water, whether it's, you know, the fact that these people decided to use these, the old corridors, you know, the intersection of 89 and 91. It was the same as the railroads all intersecting in White River Junction. Who knows what magnet it is that causes that to happen. Okay, so now you've got Greg Noonan, who and his wife Nancy, who are down in Massachusetts. He grew up in East Longmeadow, or Longmeadow, Massachusetts, and the two of them have become interested in home brewing. He's been brewing for a while now, and he decides that he wants to open up a brew pub. There are no other brew pubs in the state, in the East Coast at this point. So essentially, he's looking around at Northampton, Massachusetts, and just as he's found a place where he wants to do it, he finds out there's a brother and sister team that are already ahead of him, and they are the ones that create the Northampton Brewery. So instead of trying to create a second brewery in the same town, they begin to look for towns in New England to possibly create a brewery, and Burlington, Vermont is the lucky recipient of the second brewery on the East Coast after the craft brewing movement starts, with the Vermont Pub and Brewery. Still in its original location. If you guys have ever had the pleasure of going down inside that brew house and seeing what Greg Noonan has been able over the years to sandwich into that space, it is a testament to Yankee ingenuity. And this is something that is a hallmark of the Vermont brewing scene. We've been able to use old milk tanks from failed dairy farms. You go into any of these breweries and you'll see things cobbled together, old sugaring tanks. It's wonderful to see this stuff. Plus there's a lot of good new stainless as well. So as far as what went on, we got Catamount and Vermont Pub and Brewery that start up. Quickly on their heels, you see Lawrence Miller at Otter Creek and Andy Pearson at Long Trail, which was Mountain Brewers back then. And the interesting thing of those two is they come at it from a different point of view. Lawrence Miller spends some time in Germany and learns about Dusseldorf Alts. And as a result, Copper Ale and Andy Pearson essentially spent some time learning about German beers as well, and he also decides that Long Trail Ale is going to be something other than a British style ale. And so in Vermont we have these two parallel movements going on. We've got a lot of interest in German styles, we've got a lot of interest in the British styles. And as these different breweries spring up, you have, for example, all of these guys came from a tradition of home brewing for the most part. The first guy that would come at this from a professional standpoint would be Ray McNeil in Brattleboro. And Ray McNeil owned a pub in Brattleboro called Three Penny Deweys. And he goes in to see Steve Mason up at Catamount, and he says, "I'm your biggest account down in Brattleboro, Vermont, and you're going to teach me how to brew beer." So they put him in the intern program, and he is the first brewer that opens up a brewery from a professional background as opposed to a home brewing background. The Latches was another one. You know, it's really funny. I mean, you can see over the course of time the various breweries that have opened and closed. We've had some award-winning breweries all across the state. Cross Brewing in Morrisvill, for example, won a gold medal at the World Beer Cup for a Belgian-style ale. This was the first time we were seeing Belgian-style ales being made here in the United States. But once again, you know, production problems. You know, it's really funny. You look, one of the things that came really crystal clear in doing this book was, you know, how can these brewers that are making phenomenal beer, how can they fail? You know, what causes a brewery to fail? Well, for Cross, you know, they were making this absolutely delicious stuff. Their bottles had this nasty habit of exploding on the shelf. Okay, this was not something that retailers were willing to put up with. So as time went on, you see two reasons for various breweries to fail. Either they were making crappy beer, or they come into it so undercapitalized, which is probably one of the issues that you guys are going to face as you guys move forward on this concept. If you come into it undercapitalized, you'll last probably 5 years before you decide to pull the plug on it, that it just becomes a money pit. One of the exciting things that are happening now is here in Vermont, you know, you're wondering why we've become this mecca for beer, and part of the reason is that here we've had a very mature local vor movement, and what happened here in Vermont was that when Steve Mason or Greg Noonan decided to start making beer, Vermonters were ready to buy Vermont-made beer. I mean, it was something that's part of our DNA here, that we support the local farmers, we support local ice cream makers or coffee roasters, whatever. We're ready to support those kind of people if they're willing to make something for us to drink or eat. And so the idea of a farmer's market is something that that is not the new chic thing to do for Vermonters. I mean, we've been doing this forever. So as Vermont has become, when I'm asked this in various interviews, one of the things that people ask is like, you know, why is Vermont so different? Well, I think that as Vermont tries to find our niche in the global marketplace, one of the things that I think that we've been very successful at doing is building on our reputation for purity and being a place where good things to eat and drink come from. And I tell everybody that's willing to listen that Vermont is the American Bavaria. We are going to be, our niche in the marketplace is going to be the place where good things to eat and drink come from. And this is happening in a lot of ways here in Vermont with the cider makers. It's happening as well with the beer makers. And the number of styles, the number of different focuses from the breweries. And, you know, one of the things that's sort of interesting as far as our commitment to the local beer is that I go to the Craft Brewers Conference wherever it's held each year, and I talk to people who do my job as executive director of the Vermont Brewers Association for Colorado, Nevada, all these other states. And every one of them is just absolutely jealous of the fact that Vermont, you know, where the craft beer scene on a whole is 10% of the market, here in Vermont, we're more than 20% of the package store sales. So, you know, almost double what the national market is. And even more amazing is the fact that we're 50% of the tap handles. So you go into any bar in Vermont, more likely than not, you're gonna find a Vermont beer for sale. That's unheard of in a lot of places in the country. So I think the last thing that I want to say is that people are always asking as to whether or not we're done. You know, have we reached the critical mass here in Vermont? Is there room for any more breweries? I think there is. And I think there will be well into the future. I think that once again, you talk about if a company comes into it, if you're a really bad business person, you're going to fail at business. And it doesn't matter whether you're making beer or widgets. So if you're making the best beer on the planet and your ambition is to dominate the world's beer market, that's going to be a tough road home. Otherwise, if you walk into it, the brewery that I think about a lot when I talk about this is Stone Corral over in Huntington. The guy's name is Brett Hamilton, and he's got a system a little bit bigger than this. And all his ambition is he wants to be the brewer for Huntington, Vermont, which is population 300 or something. So if that's his ambition, he'll do just fine. He's not going to quit his day job, okay? It's these folks that go in over their head that have invested in a lot of stainless, and the craft beer market is getting crowded. I just went into a store over in Williston, and I'm going to say that 80% of the beers in that store were from out of state, all highly prized craft beers. But the Vermont beers only had a little small section in that store. I think that they're missing the boat on our dominance of the marketplace, but that's for them to figure out over the course of time. I could talk forever about my excitement and enthusiasm for Vermont beer, but really what I like to do is just drink it. I got into this at, I talk about it a little bit in the book. I mean, my father is first generation German American. He used to travel to Europe quite a bit, so he always brought home great beers whenever he traveled. And I was probably drinking beer at an age that I don't allow my grandson to drink. So, probably, at an age that is inappropriate in this day and age. But I have this passion and love for beer. I've tried my hand at home brewing. At this point, traveling around all the breweries in the state, writing for Yankee Brew News and running the association. I get to try so many wonderful beers. And part of the reason I got into making beer was because I couldn't find good beer. Well, good beer is everywhere now. So to spend a Saturday, smell of mashing grains, I don't know about you guys. For me, it's a transformative experience. I go to my happy place when I smell mashing grains. If you guys have got any questions.
So once again, that was Kurt Stouter, the head of the Vermont Brewers Association, giving a short talk about Vermont brewing history at the Full Barrel Co-op's Brew Day back in September. But now we are excited to introduce Maggie Cleary. Maggie, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Maggie, you're with Morrisvill Co-op, or MoCo as it's also known. Can you give us a little background on the project and your role in it?
Yeah. So basically, the Morrisvill Co-op is a cooperative. We are trying to start a food co-op in downtown Morrisville. And we've been at it for a couple of years now. It actually originally came out of a series of community meetings about revitalizing downtown Morrisville. And a number of community projects kind of hatched out of that, and a few task forces were formed. And the Morrisvill Food Co-op is actually the only task force from those original meetings that is still at it. So we've come a long way. We are 420 members strong, and we just recently have secured a location for our future store, which is a really exciting milestone for us.
And so starting from that commission or that group that came together to talk about this idea, what's been your process to kind of build up towards this point? Has it been mostly kind of people who know people who know people, like reaching out to different communities? Like, how has that organizing process worked for you guys?
Yeah, it was very, very grassroots from the beginning. So this started with a group of probably like 12 really involved people who had never done this before. No experience starting business, no experience starting a co-op, and they did their homework. Luckily, there are a lot of really great resources out there for people that are trying to start food co-ops. We hooked up with Food Co-op Initiative. We are a member of the Neighboring Food Co-op Association, which is a group of about 35 food cooperatives and startups in New England that basically all, it's a cooperative of cooperatives, essentially, and they all get together to support each other. So, there's people who have done this before, and they've helped us along the process. But essentially it was from the get-go. It's people knowing people. It's been a very personal community connections is what has gotten this thing going. So we pull from, we call it the Lamoille Valley region, which ends up being much of Lamoille County and a little bit beyond. Many of our members are from Morrisvill, the town of Morrisvill. We have lots of members from Stowe, lots of members from Hyde Park and Elmore, all of the smaller surrounding towns. Basically anybody who comes to Morrisvill, lives in Morrisvill, works in Morrisvill, and has an interest in seeing this business happen in downtown Morrisvill. So yeah, basically we just we started a pledge drive so it was June of last year, not this June, and that was basically to gauge community support. It was essentially going out into the community and saying, would you support this project? And we got about 500 pledges, almost 500 pledges, and that gave us the confidence basically to start moving forward and starting to collect actual concrete memberships. So I am the staff member, the lone staff member for the Morrisvill Food Co-op, and I was a volunteer with the project for a while and then took the job on last spring. It's helpful to have a full-time, I'm not full-time, I'm sorry, I'm very part-time actually, I'm about 20 hours a week. But it's helpful to have a staff person it is my responsibility to take this on. I put 15 to 20 hours a week into this project, and that just kind of really helps to keep things moving forward on a good timeline.
So going back to the commission that sort of identified this need and going out into the community and gauging community support, what kind of what have you heard from the community in terms of how this would fill a need for Morrisvill and the surrounding community?
Yeah, the Morrisvill Co-op it fills a lot of needs at the same time, which is I think really the appeal of this project. And our members come from all different mindsets as far as the number one reason why they support us. First of all, there is no food co-op in this region. And I don't know how much we're all familiar with. A food co-op is a different food shopping experience, essentially. They have a larger bulk section. They really support local agriculture, local farmers, local food producers. It's in the business makeup. And you don't find that same shopping experience in other stores. So there's that. There's a lot of people from our community that are driving to Hardwick and to Montpelier to get what they need from a food co-op. We go to Buffalo Mountain in Hardwick or to Hunger Mountain in Montpelier. And that kind of driving to purchase the food that you need is not a sustainable situation. It's frustrating for people here. So there's that. There's also this, desire to revitalize our downtown. So Morrisvill is going through a lot of changes right now. We just put in our bypass. It's a truck bypass essentially that's been in the works for a long time, and we just completed it. So now it's basically really, really easy to drive from one side of Morrisvill to the other without actually going through the downtown, which is great in many ways. It's much more convenient. It's much faster. It keeps the big trucks out of these tight corners in downtown Morrisvill. And so what that means is we're kind of like at a crossroads. It's a great opportunity. In some ways, you could look at it negatively and say, hey, everyone can just drive past downtown Morrisvill and, never even know it exists. However, you can look at it in a much more positive way and say, we're taking traffic congestion out of downtown Morrisvill. We're making it an easier town to walk and bike around, an easier town even to drive through and find parking in. And there's a lot of great changes happening because of that in downtown Morrisvill. A lot of businesses are opening. And, it's basically the community wants to make sure that in this crucial time period where things are changing in downtown Morrisvill, that the change is positive and that we're bringing people into the downtown, to park their cars, walk around, check out the stores, check out the restaurants, and realize that downtown Morrisvill is a vibrant community. So a food co-op can be a really important cornerstone in a community like that, in a downtown community, because a food co-op attracts people. It can attract people from all around the county. So they come into downtown Morrisville, they park, they do the grocery shopping, then they check out a cafe, or they, go to the bookstore, things of that sort. So that is a real appeal in our community too, is to revitalize our downtown, bring good, active vibrancy to our downtown Morrisville. So it's a project that has a wide-ranging appeal, and we're starting to really see that in our membership. And it's really cool to ask people why they became members of the co-op, because there's a lot of diversity in that. There's people who are diehard, food co-op members, and they'll drive 30 miles to buy their bulk goods. And then there's the people that just know that this could be a really great thing for our town.
So one of the things that seems to have made it a lot more concrete that happened yesterday is you guys put out a great photograph of all of these members standing around sort of in front of your new location. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the origins of this pretty big milestone for you guys, and where it is and how it fits into that downtown thing you were just discussing?
Right. So basically, as I said, this whole project originally came out of the idea of revitalizing downtown, and a food co-op just seemed to be a really great fit for that, because it was something that a lot of people in this area already want and need. And now we've been working on this for over 2 years, always with that, in the back of everyone's mind, that we want this to be downtown, we want this to be downtown. We did a number of feasibility studies, actually, consultants that kind of come in and, study traffic patterns and all that kind of thing. And a downtown location was not their number one recommendation, which is something, we had to consider. It's frustrating when you do studies that end up conflicting with what you kind of feel is right for your community. But what it came down to is a cooperative, is defined by its membership. And our members were telling us time and time again that they were supporting this project. As much as they want a food co-op in this county, the real number one reason that they supported this co-op is because they believe that it can make a real difference in downtown. And we went with that. We believe that our community knows what it wants and what it needs. So we have been looking for locations in the downtown, and this one building at 46 Pleasant Street has always been kind of the best candidate. It's the right sizing. It's kind of move-in ready. It's in good shape. It's got access from 3 directions. It's got good parking. It's got space for a loading dock, all those good infrastructure things that are just going to make our lives a lot easier trying to put this thing together. And what it comes down to is that we couldn't commit to a location up until this point, and really still at this point, because we don't have the capital and we don't have a strong enough membership yet. We have, as I said, 420 member households, which is great. That's not nothing, and it shows a lot of work, and it shows a lot of people who have been dedicated to this project before there was anything really tangible to hold on to. But, we don't have the capital or the membership to sign a lease yet. So we were lucky in the sense that we have some very committed members. One of them actually is a board member, Susan Titterton, and her husband, Bob. And they were on the original task force, some of the real kind of pushers from the get-go about getting this thing going. And they were able to purchase the building at 46 Pleasant Street with the intention of renting the ground floor to MoCo when we are ready to fill it, essentially. So this is just a huge milestone for us in so many ways. On a community level, it's something tangible that people in the community can really see and feel and visualize. And I've been setting up the office in there. People are welcome to come in and check it out. People can walk around and kind of just get a feel for it and really be like, oh, this is something that can happen here. We're hoping it's going to have a great boost of membership, because that's something that you hear from people, and it's a very understandable thing, is, where is it going to be? Is this really going to happen? I'm not sure I can just jump into this project and pay my $200 membership fee if this isn't going to happen. People need to see something. So we're hoping they will really help with boosting membership. And also it's really helpful in our planning as far as store design and layout. And, up until now, all of the stuff we've been doing for our financials and our business planning have been rather abstract. It's good guesses as far as like the general spacing and sizing and things, but now we have this space and we can basically really get down into pricing it out exactly what we need to build a co-op in this space. And that's going to really help us to know exactly what we need for capital when we get into our capital campaign. So basically, we have a great space to occupy as office space and meeting space right now. We have a great place to visualize what our future co-op can look like, but we are not move-in ready by any means. We definitely need to increase membership, and we need to get into our capital campaign so that we, have the funds to build this out.
So, so when you're mentioning the membership, do you have a particular membership goal in mind? And then for the capital campaign, is the idea to do kind of a member loan campaign, or what? What's going to be the approach going forward to get you from here to there? What are the
next steps here? So yes, we do have goals. We've always kind of had this very vague membership goal. Most co-ops open their doors with about 1,000 members. So this is, what FCI tells us, what the NFCA tells us. This is just a good guideline to go by. It's not a set in stone number. It's not like you wait until you get your 1,000th member and then you open the doors. But it's a very comfortable place to be once you're opening the doors of your co-op. So that's kind of our long-term goal and sort of a more vague one. But when we're talking, short-term concrete goals, we are looking to increase our membership by the spring into the 600 to 700 range. So that will put us in a really confident place to sign a lease on this building. At that point, we know we've really got the community support behind us, and we can feel confident committing to this space and starting to build it out. Also, people who have done this before, as well as professionals involved in the field, tell us that 700 members, you don't want to have too much less than 700 members to start your member loan campaign. And this is going to be a really important part of our funding. So essentially, when it comes to funding a project like this, you have your memberships, which is great capital because you don't have to pay it back. It's just there, and we already, we're building that now. Every member that becomes a member of the co-op is going to be a portion of that capital, and then there'll be, more conventional loans from banks. This is obviously not the most preferred form of capital because there's interest and you have to pay it back. Grants and things like that. We have somebody who is a former board member, actually, whose sole job it is now to be looking into grants and what we can get in, to help us along the way. And then member loan campaign is a really big part of our funding. So essentially, in the member loan campaign, we go back into our membership, which is, our community, and see basically what people are willing to loan or donate, in the form of preferred shares. And that becomes a really crucial part of our funding. Generally, the interest rates are lower when they come from your members. And also, it's just as far as, when you think of it is a community project, and we want this thing to be built by the community. And when the money comes in, these little increments from all over the county, it just has a much stronger meaning for when you're getting this thing built. It really creates a sense of ownership and pride in this community-owned grocery store that we're trying to build. So that's, where membership becomes really important. I mean, obviously, we are cooperative. We are defined by membership. Membership will always be important because we own the store. But right now, at this point in our development, membership is so crucial because it provides a good portion of that capital. It sets us up to form, to pull off a successful member loan campaign. And it also is the number one indicator of support from our community that we can show to potential lenders and donors and, when we're writing grants and things of that sort, showing this number of members from our community is what it's all about with a project like this.
Well, congratulations on finding that space. That's a huge step forward for the co-op's
it is very
efforts.
Exciting. we invite anyone who wants to come stop by and check out the space. I should be in there holding office hours starting the week after next. I'll be there Tuesday afternoons, Wednesday mornings, Friday mornings. So please check the website, and you can check out that schedule and come by and check it out and visualize how it can be. It's exciting.
And as you look ahead to continuing to grow membership to get to this critical mass, what sort of strategies do you envision? Are there events coming up where folks can sort of learn about the co-op and get involved?
Yeah, we do a number of. We always try to do at least 1 or 2 a month of a mixer, is what we call them. And up until now, we've always done them in different businesses around the county. Just kind of people. Oftentimes they are our members, and they invite us into their business, so we kind of set up shop, and anyone can come by and learn about the co-op. And we've done a lot of those. We'll probably start doing a lot of those types of events in our space now that we have it, just because it's a nice space to invite people into, and it's just a nice way for people to kind of get in the building, get a feel for it, and really start to get a picture of what it could be like to have a store in there. So that's part of it. We're trying to really encourage our members to throw house parties. That's something that's been successful in the past. And this basically, this really personalizes is the project. It's basically some of our members might invite their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers, their colleagues to their home for the purpose of learning about MoCo. And representatives from MoCo come and talk, and it's it is really a direct pitch for membership, but it kind of makes it fun and social, and it helps people to understand. My neighbors are doing this, my friends are doing this, my coworkers are doing this. I can do this too. So that's a big part of it, and we're going to really start trying now that we have the space too. It really helps us to get out, in the media ways, Facebook, we got the Instagram going on, ads in the papers and things like that. Our local papers have been really supportive about running, photos and just things like that to get us out in the community. The Front Porch Forum has been an amazing way of getting word out. It's free, and it reaches people in your community. People really are on the Front Porch Forum, and they're paying attention to it. So any of this kind of stuff, we're at the point still where anything that's free is awesome, because we don't want to spend our members' money on advertisement. We want to spend our members' money on building a store. So but there's a balance to that. You got to get yourself out there too. So you got to spend a little money in some ways to get the name out. But
Definitely.
a project that we're working on for December that we're excited about too is reaching out to all of our local businesses, because we have a lot of them now, but we could have more, and we should. The Morrisvill Co-op is going to be a great thing for business in general in downtown Morrisville and kind of throughout all of Morrisville and in the county, and just helping our business owners to understand that and hopefully to become partners with us. So that's something we're going to be working on through December and January, and kind of featuring those businesses that are supporting us and help to support them.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for sharing the story so far. And if folks want to learn more, what is the website?
We're at www.morrisvillecoop.com.
Okay.
And you're welcome to friend us on Facebook, and then all of our contact information is on the website there. So give us a call, write us a letter, whatever it takes. Reach out.
Thank you much for giving us the update, and we'll definitely be following your progress as you continue along the road to opening the store.
Great.
Thanks.
Well, thanks so much for reaching out, and I'm happy to be on the show.
All right. Well, take care.
All right. Bye.
All right. Well, so it sounds like they're really, really cranking along.
Yeah. That getting that store it is something tangible. People can get in the space and envision, the store.
Yeah. So we'll be following this story and others, and for folks out there who are watching, who want to keep abreast of all the co-op news, which there seems to be a lot of right now, you can always head over to our Cooperative Vermont Facebook page. And we do this show. We tend to do it every other week. So until next time, I'm Matt Cropp.
And I'm Eric Davis.
Have a good evening.